Welcome to Crosstalk. I'm Peter Lavelle. The biggest and most expensive elections money can buy. This is how many Americans see what are called political action committees, or super PACs. Are the super PACs good for democracy? Do they really inform in voters? And are elections now only about money? To Crosstalk Political Action Committees, I'm joined by Seton Motley in Washington. He is the president and editor-in-chief of Less Government. Also in Washington, we have Craig Holman. He is a government affairs lobbyist for Public Citizen. And in Los Angeles, we cross to Arun Gupta. He is the founding editor of the Independent newspaper. All right, gentlemen, Crosstalk rules in effect. That means you can jump in anytime you want, and I really very much encourage it. Arun in Los Angeles, if I can go to you first. In researching this program, I came across, I thought it was a very interesting, if not funny statement. Everyone loves to hate super PACs. One critic said that they were, quote, a new political animal that is ugly, loud, and anti-democratic. Would you agree or disagree with that statement?
Oh, it certainly is fundamentally anti-democratic. You essentially have extremely wealthy people who can come in, corporations that can come in with no disclosure. They can coordinate with campaigns, spend huge amounts of money distorting the political process. They can basically broadcast whatever propaganda they like at whatever time. And we live in an age, the second Gilded Age in America, where there's just enormous concentration of wealth, and we know that there are billionaires running around, whether it's someone like George Soros or the Koch brothers, who have a vested interest in trying to game the political system. And we have to see this also in the larger context of how money is used in politics in the United States. There's something like 17,000 registered lobbyists in Washington, D.C., the vast majority of them controlled by corporations or trade groups, and they exist essentially to influence the process, to write laws and regulations so that money flows towards them. And this is what Citizens United and the super PACs are all about. We've arrived at the point that we have the best democracy that money can buy.
Okay, Craig, what do you think about that in Washington, D.C.? Arun has a pretty strong opinion. What do you think about it?
You know, I've got to take that opinion even stronger. Super PACs are perhaps the most dangerous trend we've seen in the financing of American elections recently. You know, the Supreme Court, 5 justices on the Supreme Court opened up an absolutely disastrous floodgate of unlimited and largely undisclosed money in American elections when they ruled just 2 years ago, this is the anniversary, by the way, of the Citizens United decision, in which 5 justices ruled that corporations are to be treated as people under the U.S. Constitution and therefore can make unlimited expenditures. Now, that's bad enough that we're having this flood of unlimited corporate money flowing into elections, and which is largely going undisclosed. But then, to make it even worse, we've got this new phenomenon called super PACs that are directly and very closely aligned with each of the presidential candidates. These are candidate-specific groups that are receiving unlimited corporate money, unlimited union money, unlimited wealth from individuals specifically to support a candidate. Either Romney, Gingrich, or Obama is setting up his own. As a result, we're going back to the pre-Watergate era in which the very wealthy get to buy these elections.
If I can go to Seton here, and I'd like to point out to our viewers here, is that I was a small boy during Watergate, and I can remember afterwards, a lot of people said at least the positive outcome of the scandal called Watergate was election campaigning reform. And Seton, is that all gone now with the decision in 2010? Because it looks like we've just skipped a few decades. Go ahead.
Unfortunately, no, it's not all gone. I'm sorry you guys are so antithetical to free speech. Money is speech in our society. Money is groceries in society. You can argue that it's not, but try leaving the grocery store with some groceries without money. Money is speech in this country, and I'm sorry you guys are so obtusely offended by all this free speech going on. The reason super PACs exist is because we still have stupid anti-First Amendment campaign finance laws laws on the books. You want to complain about lobbyists? Lobbyists is one of the few jobs that's actually mentioned in the Constitution. Petition Congress of your grievances. The problem is government is so incredibly huge that it requires so many lobbyists to try to hurt it and beat it back off people's particular industries. If you want to campaign finance reform, reduce the size, scope, and sphere of influence of government, and there won't be any need to bribe all these politicians.
Okay, Aruna, what do you think about that? I mean, it's a free speech issue here. I mean, but it gets down to those that have free speech have the money. If you have money, you can have free speech.
Well, of course, this is based on the just absurd notion that corporations are people. And as Justice Stevens wrote in his dissent in Citizens United,
wait a minute.
You know, if corporations are people, why don't we allow them to run for office? Why don't we allow them to vote? You know, I think I would be more honest. Why don't we have President ExxonMobil? I mean, I think a good example of this, if we look at it more broadly in terms of the corrupting influence of money in our society, is that over the last few years, essentially the energy industry and its allies have been pouring about $3 to $4 billion a year.
How's that working with Keystone Pipeline?
Distorting the facts on climate change. They're basically interested in essentially trying to distort what is proven science, that the climate is shifting. Now, unless you believe that species that are changing their habitat, unless you believe that the planet, unless you believe itself that the planet itself is in on this fraud, where spring is coming earlier, where ecosystems are shifting.
Do you remember
gentlemen, let's stay with super PACs. Gentlemen, let's go to Craig. Let's go to Craig and let's stay with super PACs. Craig, go ahead.
It's a fraud.
Let's talk about the money. Let's talk about the money issue. Right. Let's talk about the money issue as opposed to the policy issues.
Let's talk about Al Gore's money issue with regard to being the first eco-billionaire.
Ever since Watergate, we recognize that when you have any individual or corporation or any entity that can throw in too much money to a candidate, you can potentially corrupt that candidate. So now that we have, so with the Watergate era, we set up a system of having reasonable limits on how much money can go into politics. We've lost those reasonable limits, and now groups, corporations, anyone can throw in $5 million, $10 million to support a presidential candidate, specifically that candidate, and that candidate's going to know who feathered his or her bed to get elected president. That is a very, very dangerous precedent.
Isn't it true you're at least a little upset that the free market people can now spend as much as the unions always could under these rules?
Okay, Seton, can I ask you a question here? I mean, it's well known, it's common knowledge that most of these super PACs that are supporting candidates, as was just pointed out, they're former staffers from the candidate. There's no Chinese wall there. No, but I mean, that's what they're supposed to be, separate.
I don't care
but
about
they're
the
not
wall.
Separate.
It's an unconstitutional wall. It's an unconstitutional wall. You're telling people how they can spend their money. That, to me, is an abuse of the First Amendment.
Logic that somehow corporations are people.
Okay.
Excuse me, who forms corporations? People do. They don't lose their rights because they form a business or form a corporation.
People drive cars,
and by
so
the
does
way,
that
unions
make cars
are corporations.
people?
Unions are corporations, and they can spend any way they want.
All right, it's quiet down, gentlemen. Craig, if I can go to you. Again, I'd like to go back to these things. I mean, super PACs, okay, they have a lot of money. We've all agreed to that, okay? But it's also a way to deny, it's an deniability. You know, we have the candidate saying, well, this ad ran, and well, I have nothing to do with it. I didn't have any involvement in it. But of course, it's that candidate's former staffers that are working over there.
They're forced to by law to say that.
I'm asking Craig. What do you think?
That's exactly right. What we're seeing going on in the Republican primaries, where the Republican candidates are criticizing their own super PACs for doing these negative and false ads, that really is just a whole bunch of bluster. These super PACs are doing exactly what the candidates want to do. They pretend that they don't even see the ads that the super PACs are running. Yet every time one of these presidential candidates gives a speech, they're echoing exactly what the super PACs are saying. The super PACs are the dirty mechanisms. They're the ones that can do all the dirty work for the presidential candidates, coming up with lies, slanders, or just negative campaign ads, while the candidates themselves try to distance themselves in arm's length and say, I criticize what that super PAC did, but, you know, this is the message. So it's really all bluster. I mean, all these presidential candidates realize these super PACs are exceedingly beneficial.
Okay, Seton, why are they forced to do that? Why are they forced?
The law says, the stupid law says that they can't coordinate with the super PAC. And now you're criticizing them for adhering to the stupid law that you're insisting upon.
But they are coordinating. That's the point.
Our coordination rules. Our
If
coordination
they're
rules are
coordinating, they should be
woefully
arrested
inadequate.
under your stupid campaign finance.
Come on,
staffers.
Seton, do you believe for 1 second they're not coordinating? Former staffers for a candidate or not?
I don't have a problem with them coordinating.
But they're not
you
supposed
guys have
to.
a problem with them coordinating. I don't have a problem with them coordinating. This is free speech. I don't
So
have
then
people
you're
collaborating on free
I
speech.
think part of the important point is that this keeps getting back to the issue of free speech. And as many constitutional scholars have noted, that essentially the 5-4 majority decision swept aside more than a century of precedent, that this was a radical
illegal,
activist
unconstitutional
judiciary
law
that was overturning all sorts of precedent in terms of, well,
Yes,
you know, hey, maybe you should be on the
yes.
Supreme Court since you're such a great constitutional scholar. Maybe you can get someone to buy you your position there, some corporation.
Well, how old's the
That's right.
Constitution? It's over 200 years old.
We've had
We're talking about 100 years of bad precedent
We've had
on
a century of constitutional law.
All right, gentlemen, I'm going to jump in here. We're going to go to a short break. We'll keep the discussion going, but after that short break, we'll continue our discussion on super PACs. Stay with RT. Welcome back to Crosstalk. I'm Peter Lavelle. To remind you, we're discussing whether super PACs are good for democracy. Okay, Seton, I'd like to ask you, do these super PACs and these really dreadful ads that they put on television, do they actually inform people? Is there any information, valuable information there to make decisions?
Sure. Sure, and unlike everybody else on this panel, I actually trust the American people to discern and delineate what's useful and what's not and make a rational and intelligent decision. These people seem to think that the American people are sheep and idiots and can't figure out what's true and what's not in these ads.
Well, I mean, if you're crowding out the public sphere and you're only getting certain messages, it's hard to make a decision. Craig, you want to jump in there? Go ahead.
Excuse me, the internet is a cornucopia. You can get whatever you want or need off the internet. These ads are not swaying people.
Well, I mean, Seton, you would probably agree with me that then if it isn't the case, then why are they spending so much money on it? Go ahead, Craig, jump in.
Well, because it's part of the process.
Go ahead,
These are very negative ads. These are very negative ads. This is not useful information. These are very negative ads. We've got Mitch Romney. Mitch Romney, who had previously supported abortion rights, ragging on Gingrich for supporting abortion rights, which Gingrich doesn't. I mean, it's misinformation that's coming out here and negative advertising. This is not constructive. It not only turns off voters towards the election, but it also increases the cost for buying campaign ads for the candidates and the parties who have serious messages to offer. No, this is drowning out
the Democrats have all kinds of serious
dialogue.
messages. The DNC is full of them.
Okay.
Well, excuse me, I have a question. When ABC lies in their reporting, when NBC lies in their reporting, they're not held to this accountability standard that you're applying to private citizens. Why is that?
Well, I mean,
yes, they are. There's this thing called libel laws. It's if you practice journalism, you might actually know this. Look, I mean, here's the thing about the whole Citizens United and super PACs. We have to see this in the historical context. The destruction of the Fairness Doctrine in 1987 by the Reagan administration. There was a prevailing doctrine that the public airwaves, they are public. It is in the only interest to regulate the public airwaves to have a healthy democracy. And by these corporations and wealthy individuals being able to funnel in tens of millions of dollars, they are essentially controlling the public airwaves. Now, what it has to do is preponderance of opinion. It's not about that you can spend hours or days maybe finding the dissenting opinion. It's what people are bombarded with every day. That's why they start to believe that global warming is a fraud, even though the evidence is incontrovertible. That's why people believe that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, even though none were ever found.
All right, gentlemen, I don't want to go down this path again. All right,
opinion is what matters here. It's the buying of the political process.
Okay, it's interesting. I want to stay with that note here. Craig, I want to go back to you. Do you think that media is complicit in this as well? As because they make actually a lot of money off of this. I mean, these ads are expensive. They make money off of it. And they would like to see the process go on as long as possible because it's very profitable for television stations. It has nothing to do with journalistic values or democratic hopes or anything else. It's about making a lot of money, and they're pretty pleased with it. They love the primaries.
You know, by the way, it's not only the media who's getting rich off these elections, off of these super PACs. It is also many of the people who are running these super PACs. If you take a look at the super PACs, since they're unaccountable to any real candidate or political party, they tend to hire their own people to do the media work, their own colleagues, their own partners. There is a flood of money going into these super PACs, and we find it all being circulated within a very small elite circle of people who are running the super PACs because they lack accountability. So it's not only a dangerous trend for our elections. This is ripe for corruption here.
Okay, Arun, it seems.
So you don't like free speech or free markets?
Okay, but I mean, see, is this just buying elections now? I mean, you crowd out the space with negative ads.
No.
Go ahead.
The American people aren't cheap. The American people aren't cheap.
You know, we've heard your talking points enough times already. Yes, of course it is about buying elections. Look, I just spent the last 3 months
Look, your electorate may be stupid enough to be swayed by ads and only ads. Ours isn't.
I talked to hundreds of people all across the country in various cities who were all saying the same things. Our voice doesn't matter. They said things like, you can't, you're not a corporation unless you have a senator or two in your pocket. You know, we can't buy the political process like corporations can. People across the country fundamentally understand that we have a political system that is owned, bought and sold and owned by the corporations. And you can go out and find this opinion on any street corner across the country.
The most anti-free market president ever get elected?
Barack Obama received huge amounts of money from Wall Street. Barack Obama is part of the problem. Okay, I'm not a partisan like you. The money has fundamentally corrupted the political process. That's how Wall Street.
No, it hasn't.
That's how Wall Street
so you're saying
got
free speech has corrupted the political system.
Essentially crashing the global economy. Okay, they have bought the political process.
That was Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae and the Community Reinvestment Act. This is what this is all about. They were able to buy a huge bailout, and then they were able to essentially sabotage any sort of finance reform. There's been no sort of prosecution. The Democrats and Republicans are peas in a pod on this issue and on many other issues. You know, Barack Obama has also undermined climate change talks.
Craig, go ahead. Do you want to jump in there? Go ahead.
The most frightening aspect about this is super PACs are not just buying elections. This time around, they're actually trying to buy the White House.
Yeah.
And so that's a very frightening prospect here. We're seeing not only so much money going in there, we're seeing super PACs that are really essentially coordinated with the presidential candidates, pumping in $5 million, $10 million, $100 million to support a presidential candidate. Whoever's going to be elected president is going to know who he or she owes their election to. This is a frightening prospect for America. You know, I'd like to also add,
Stephen brought up the subject of the XL pipeline, which I think
you can tell by the lack of civility in this discussion going on right now how dangerous this is.
Okay, gentlemen.
which I think is a great example. There was a recent vote in the House on the XL pipeline. In terms of the representatives who voted against approving the XL pipeline, they had received perhaps about $1 million from the oil and gas industry. For those who wanted the XL pipeline, and the vote was pretty close, they had received over $8 million from the oil and gas industry. It's pretty evident that the buying of the political process and legislation is going on.
Seton, go ahead, jump in.
Excuse me.
Just naysaying is not
First of all, why'd they waste their $1 million then? Second of all, money chases ideas. It's not the other way around. I wasn't a liberal until somebody wrote me a check, and then all of a sudden I was a conservative. That's absurd. The money chases the ideas, not the other way around.
Okay, Craig, if I could go back to if I can go back to campaign financing, up until the Supreme Court decision, contributing campaigns, there was accountability. Do you think there's any reason for middle class people to write a check for any candidate these days if so much big money is out there that crowds out the process? Being part of the political process and supporting candidates what's the point in doing it? I mean, if $10 is nothing compared to the numbers you just mentioned.
Being part of the political process really hurts
I think Stephen Colbert
for most
is
Americans
right
because of the lack of the money. Take a look at the Occupy Wall Street movement, the Occupy D.C. movement, the Occupy K Street movement, the Tea Party. I mean, this is where groups, the citizens, average Americans, are finding their frustration. And many of these people, especially in the Occupy Wall Street movement, are actually advocating don't bother voting. It doesn't matter anymore. We're not going to see an increase in voting turnout, I bet, in the 2012
Republicans in the House last year, and they don't have a ton of money. Wait a minute. The Tea Party elected 60-plus Republicans in the House last year, and they don't have this kind of money. So what are you talking about? What are you talking about? The Tea Party was a transformational movement.
Republicans raised
the Koch brothers were out there.
Republicans raised well over $100 million.
247% increase. 247% increase following Citizens United decision of outside spending. They had a ton of money.
Come on, Seton.
They did not. I know the top 3 Tea Party groups. Believe me, they'd love to have a ton of money. They don't.
Okay,
well, that's absurd. So you don't know what you're talking about.
This is.
Go ahead, Arun. Go ahead.
This is essentially the type of distortion that goes on. It's basically.
Go ahead, Arun, go ahead.
We hear these blatant lies, at least on this show, that we're able to counter some of these lies. But the thing about Citizens United and Super PACs, they are able to essentially spew propaganda with no opposition whatsoever. And I think it's true that voting is political process doesn't matter. I think we should have politicians outfitted like NASCAR drivers, where it shows their sponsors on their suits. They should have to wear logos from Microsoft and ExxonMobil and the Koch brothers.
Okay, Craig, go ahead, jump in.
Yeah, we're going to see $8 billion spent in the 2012 elections, and we're going to see a decrease in voter turnout because most of that money is going to be very negative. It's going to, leave most Americans feeling disgusted with our campaign finance system, and it is not going to help mobilize or increase the confidence or increase the integrity of the democratic system in the U.S.
Okay.
We are in a very dangerous period. I want to echo that.
Okay, Seton, I'm going to give you the last word. 20 seconds.
Well, first of all, if government was shrunk, we wouldn't have to do all this. Second of all, the reason turnout's going to be down is because Obama's magical run is over, and a lot of the new first-time voters who never voted but voted for him will be gone next time.
Okay, gentlemen, very spirited discussion. Thank you very much. Many thanks to my guests today in Los Angeles and in Washington, and thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time, and remember, crosstalk rules.